we're going to talk about lots of different kinds of angles. Many of the angles that we're going to talk about are formed because of parallel lines. A couple of other angles are just formed because of intersecting lines, but we're going to look at that. So first of all, adjacent angles is the first ones that we're going to talk about. Adjacent angles are two angles side by side. There's not a relationship on the adjacent angles, except that angle 1 plus angle 2 does equal that whole measure of that angle. But they could just equal whatever the whole thing is. They might equal 90, they might equal 180, they might be congruent. There's lots of different relationships that could happen with adjacent angles, so nothing in particular. Vertical angles are two angles across from each other. And vertical angles are always congruent. Here's a picture of two vertical angles, and what you need to know is that vertical angles are either side by side across from each other. They could also be above, so the two orange ones are vertical, but also the two that are across from each other. So vertical angles are just across from each other. They might be up and down, and they might be across. Corresponding angles are congruent. And corresponding angles are formed by two parallel lines. These little two symbols here mean these two lines are parallel. And as long as these two lines are parallel, these two angles are congruent. What happens with corresponding angles is that they are on the same side of the transversal. The transversal is the line that goes through the parallel lines. So the transversal is this line. Notice that these two angles here are on the same side of that. And they kind of look the same, and they like skip an angle to get to it. So they're on the same side of the transversal, and I'm going to put skip an angle. That's not a great description, but that's sort of what's going on. So there's also some corresponding angles at other places. For example, this is a corresponding angle, and I skip that angle right next to it and come down here, and there's another one. So they're on the same side, and you sort of skip an angle to get to it. Okay, these two are also corresponding, and then these two are also corresponding. There's actually 4 pair in that particular picture. Okay, alternate interior angles. These are alternate interior angles. Notice how here's our parallel lines again. This is the transversal. They're on the opposite sides of the transversal. And they're inside the parallel lines. Like here's a parallel line and here's a parallel line. They're inside of it. They're not outside. Outside will be up here. The inside is just kind of right there in the middle. And I'm going to draw the parallel lines like that so you don't have to write all the words. Those two angles are also congruent. Okay, alternate exterior angles are these two angles. They are also congruent. They are still on the opposite sides of the transversal. And they're outside the parallel lines. So here's the parallel lines again. And notice how they're outside of it. They're away from it. And they're opposite because one's on one side of the line and one's on the other side of the line. On the last problem, there are 2 other alternate interior angles. There's also 2 other alternate exterior angles. Same side interior and exterior are exactly what they say they are. Sometimes you might see the word consecutive interior, which is kind of weird, but I'll always say same side. Same side, notice how they are on the same side of the transversal, and they're interior, so they're inside the parallel lines, so they're the same side of the transversal, but they're inside the parallel lines. These 2 angles are supplementary. or they're equal to 180 degrees. And if you look at it, that kind of makes sense because this angle's big and this one's small. And those two angles, they actually add up to equal 180. They are not congruent. Alright, same side exterior angles. Again, they're on the same side. But they're outside the parallel lines. I'm sorry I spelled that wrong, but that's an S and an I and a D and an E. So outside the parallel lines. These are also supplementary. Alright, so let's look at a picture here. So we have this picture, and what we're going to do is we're going to identify some angles that fit the description. And there's a couple important information. First here it says all the little angles are congruent and all the big angles are congruent. So what that means is every little angle is congruent to each other as long as they're parallel lines. So if these two are parallel, here's the transversal. So let's start with angle 2. Angle 2 is little. Well, what other angles are little? Well, angle 3 is little, angle 6 is little, and angle 7 is little. All of those angles are congruent to each other because they're all little. Let's start with angle 1. Angle 1 is big. Well, angle 4 is also big. And then 5 and 8 are also big. So, just so you know, when you're looking at a picture like that, these 4 angles are congruent and these 4 angles are congruent. Now, when you're looking at the types of angles, we're just going to kind of look at the description that we just wrote and try to find those answers. So vertical angles are angles that are across from each other. So angle 1 and angle 4 is across from each other. And we'll say angle 1 and angle 4. Now, there's plenty of other vertical angles. 2 and 3 are also vertical. 5 and 8 are vertical. 6 and 7 are vertical. I'm just writing one pair, but there's all those other pairs. You can write how many you want. Corresponding angles. Alright, there's 4 pair. If I start with angle 3, remember I told you it's on the same side and you skip an angle? So here's 3, skip 5, so 7 must be the one that goes with it. So 3 and 7 are corresponding. 4 and 8 are corresponding. But also 1 and 5 and 2 and 6. Again, there's lots of other pairs. I'm just writing one pair for you. Alternate interior angles. Okay, alternate sides inside the parallel line. So that would be 3 and 6. And then 4 and 5 are also alternate interior. With alternate interior, there's only 2 pair. Alternate exterior is also 2 pair. So exterior is way out here. So 1 and 8 are exterior and alternate. But 2 and 7 are also alternate exterior. Okay, a linear pair is supplementary. And those are 2 angles in these pictures that are side by side and make a line. Again, I'm going to just show you one of them, but there's lots. Angle 1 and 2 are side by side, they're supplementary, but also 2 and 4 is, and 3 and 4, and 3 and 1, and then all the 4 pairs down here as well. Same side interior are 2 angles inside, so 3 and 5 are same side interior. 4 and 6 is also same side interior. Same side exterior would be 1 and 7. And also 2 and 8. So now that you know a little bit about the types of angles and their relationship, let's look at a few problems. So first of all, in 1 through 4, you're just finding the missing angle. So I look at this makes a line. So I know to find this one, I'm just going to take 180 and I'm going to subtract 82. And whatever I get there will be my other angle. It's 98 degrees. So 98 is my missing angle. On number 2, so this is 66. Well, it's asking me for this angle. So first of all, I'm going to think about, okay, what angle is this? Well, that's corresponding because there's an angle, I'm skipping one, there's another, it's away from each other. Also notice that they're the same size, they're both little. That means that because they're corresponding, they're congruent, but also they're both little, so this is 66 degrees, not much to do there. Number 3, this is 110. I'm looking for this angle. Those two angles are alternate interior angles, but also they're both big. Because they're big and both alternate interior, they're congruent, so 110 is my answer there. Number 4, these two angles are same side interior angles. And because they're same side interior, and this one's big and this one's little, I know that these two angles add up to be 180, so I'm going to subtract 180 from 100. I get 80, so 80 is the angle I'm looking for. On 5 through 8, you're just going to solve an equation. So you first figure out, are they equal to each other or equal to 180, and then you solve it. So number 5, these two angles are same side interior angles. So I add them together and equal them to 180, and then I solve. So I subtract 180 on both sides. 128, I'm sorry, subtract 128 on both sides. Divide by 2, and I get that. Number 7, again, figure out what kind of angle it is and figure out if they're equal or congruent or 180. These two angles are alternate exterior. Alternate exterior are congruent. So all I do is I say 70 equals x plus 16. Same side interior is 180. Most of the others are equal. So I just put an equal between of them instead of an equal 180. And then I solve for x. I'm going to subtract 16 on both sides. And then that's my answer because I don't need to divide. Number 7, these are alternate interior angles. So alternate exterior angles were congruent. Alternate interior angles are congruent. They're also both little. So because it's congruent, I just put an equals between it. And then I solve. So I'm going to add 4 on both sides. Divide by 8. And then I get x equals 8. Last question. These two angles, again, think about them. Oh, they're corresponding because they kind of look like number 2. And they look like the picture in the previous problems. But because they're corresponding, they're equal. They're both big. So I just put an equals between them. And then I solve. I'm going to subtract 21x to get it over here. So I get 2x. Add 5 on both sides. And then divide by 2. So most angles are going to be equal to each other, corresponding, alternate interior, alternate exterior, but same side interior and same side exterior equals 180. So you add them and equal them to 180, unless they're the other kind, and you just put equals between them.